Roasted garlic soup is a classic dish that doesn't appear on restaurant menus very often because many guests are worried about what their breath will be like afterward. This isn't as much of a problem as most people imagine, though, because roasted garlic doesn't have the same pungency as fresh garlic. The method I'm showing you here is very unusual, with cabbage being converted into garlic-like background flavors. Believe it or not, you will not taste the cabbage in the final dish here. No one will ever imagine that most of the flavor is actually from enzymatically modified cabbage.
Ingredients for this first part are quite simple. We got 300 grams of potatoes, which I'm going to slice thinly in just a minute, 100 grams of cabbage. If you have volume 3 of my cookbook series, then use about 1.5 teaspoons of the Yucatan spice blend. It's not really a blend, it's more complicated than that, as you know if you have volume 3. If you don't, then grind up a bay leaf in a spice mill and just put in a ground bay leaf. It won't be as good, but it'll still work. It'll still be a great soup. And I've got 70 grams of garlic here, 60 of which are going to be used in the first phase, and then we'll save the last 10 for the end. So we've got to use a food processor on the cabbage and garlic and use that same trick that, again, I explained in volume 3 of the cookbook series, how we're going to use the garlic to enzymatically convert the cabbage into something else. Here we have the cabbage, which I coarsely chopped, and 60 grams of the garlic. And what you want to use for this is like a ceramic loaf pan, and we're going to begin by kind of dotting the bottom here with little pieces of butter. This not only helps it release later, but it adds a little bit extra flavor in the bottom. I sliced these potatoes on a mandolin with a 1.3 millimeter setting, so they're quite thin. They're not paper thin, but they're thin. So you want to get a layer down. It doesn't have to be exact. Now that we've got the first layer down, we'll put a little bit of either the Yucatan seasoning or the ground up bay leaf and some of this cabbage, and then another layer of potato, and then more of the seasoning mixture or bay leaf, about another third of the cabbage and garlic. The next layer, now I'm going to put the last of this down. And the final layer of potato. Again, it doesn't have to be precise or pretty, because it's all going to get ground up in the end anyway. The final top layer here does not have any of the ground bay leaf or the spice mix. That's all down inside of it. Now we're going to cover it loosely with foil here, like this. After 3 hours at 160, this is what you end up with. Now this is going to be scraped out into a blender. Just a second here. So in addition to the material that was braised in the oven, I'm going to add the rest of the garlic, which is just over 10 grams, and the chicken stock. The puree is then passed through a sieve. Make sure there's no pieces left. Shouldn't be much anyway, but just to get rid of any particles. I'm going to bring this back up to a simmer on a medium heat. Just a few minutes. Ladle it into the bowl. Put a little Parmesan over the top, and the heat from the soup will largely melt the Parmesan. You can flash it under a salamander if you have the tool available, of course.
I'm very pleased to announce the release of Volume 3, The Focus on Food Chemistry. I want to clear up a few things about these 3 volumes. First, they all contain completely different information. There's no duplication, they're not revisions. When I wrote Volume 1, I had 2.5 years of YouTube videos to cover. People had been asking me for the printed list of ingredients for all of those dishes, and so I obliged. There are recipes with stepwise directions and many tips offered throughout, as well as an extensive history of Russian cuisine over the last 1,000 years, but Volume 1 is very different from Volume 2 and 3. In Volumes 2 and 3, I only had about 9 months of YouTube recipes to cover in each, so I was able to provide stepwise directions for everything. In Volume 2, I included a lot of additional information about cooking and some simple examples of flavor chemistry to set the stage for Volume 3. While Volume 2 hopefully got you thinking about some of the processes that go on in cooking and how flavors are expressed and sensed at the molecular level, the topic was painted with pretty broad strokes to make it easy to digest. Pun intended. Volume 3 is a milestone in the series, in which I have included an entire introductory course in food chemistry, which is why Volume 3 is about 70 pages longer than Volume 2. And if you just want the recipes, that's okay too. You don't have to read the first few chapters, but if you've ever been curious about what influences tastes and flavors and the rationale for deciding cooking times and temperatures and why things taste different when they're combined in different ways, this book will answer many of those questions. It also paves the way for Volume 4, which will be next year. If you want to know more about my adventures as a chef around the world and have some great laughs along the way, be sure to check out the video tour of my book, 40 Years in One Night. It's up on YouTube right now. Click the link.
Also look for my cocktail book, Cocktails of the South Pacific and Beyond, Advanced Mixology, available through Amazon online.